sensitive people have the ability to transform this world that has become insensitive to what is meaningful and true and real. Hello and welcome back to Remember Why You're Here, a podcast for seekers and sensitives where you can relax, receive, reconnect to yourself, and remember the most important thing of all, why you're here. I'm Asia Suler, author, teacher, earth intuitive, and sensitive person. And in this episode, we're going to be talking about what it actually means to be sensitive. We've all probably been telegraphed one thing in our life. Maybe we have a more expanded understanding of what it means to be sensitive now, but in this episode, I'm really going to go into what it actually means to be sensitive on a physical level in our bodies and our nervous systems, but also at a more metaphysical level. Like, why are sensitive people created? What is our role here on this planet? And when we understand what it actually means to be sensitive, we understand ourselves as sensitives. We understand the uniqueness of the mission that we came here to fulfill. So if you are a sensitive person, if you identify as sensitive, or you have a sensitive person in your life, this episode is going to be a must listen for you. Before we dive in, I just want to say again, thank you to everyone who has rated or reviewed this podcast so far. It has felt like just getting sparkles or fizzy bubbles of champagne added to my day each time I see a new rating or review. And there's so many amazing ones so far, but I did want to read just the header, the title of this one review, because it's everything. This review from Jess, which is so lovely. And the header, the title of the review is A Gentle Reminder to Keep Going. And if that's not just everything, right? That's like the goal of this podcast, is to be a gentle reminder to keep going. There's delight here. There's delight, there's possibility, there's expansion, there's new realms of healing. And that so much of this comes through when we just remember why we're here. Okay, so let's get into the episode. I have known that I've been a sensitive person my entire life. It's been a part of my family's stories surrounding me, my own personal mythology from a very young age. Apparently, when I was basically still in diapers, I was taken to the pediatrician and done some sort of testing to see like your level of responsiveness. And according to my mom, I was off the charts. Or at least that's what the pediatrician said. Like, I scored off the map in terms of my reactivity and my bodily response to things. So from a really early age, I was aware that I was very sensitive. It was something that was reflected back to me by my family. At times, something that was made a lot of, support and allowance for, but then also at other times that was really misunderstood and misattuned to. And I think that's the case with a lot of sensitive people, and in part that's because of the overarching cultures that we have grown up in, right? And the stories about what sensitivity means, what it looks like, and how it's a hindrance. For me, sensitivity in my early years often manifested by being very quiet and very perceptive. I was an observer in the classroom mostly. My parents would get like report cards back for me that said like, Asia's a very mature, observant child. And they'd be like, who are you talking about? Because I would get home and I would just let it all out. I would be sort of the other side of sensitive. So there's this one side of sensitive, right? Where if you're highly sensitive, then you might be very perceptive, very attuned. You're constantly tracking. You're very observational. And then the other side is that you have a lot of emotion, you have a lot of intensity inside of yourself. Like there's a lot that wants to come out. You have big feelings. And so I would get home and it would just be all the big feelings and all the intensity and all of that. So I often felt like I had these like two irreconcilable sides to myself. But the more that I have grown up and learned about what it actually means to be sensitive, the more I realized that these two sides to myself are not irreconcilable, but are actually just two sides of the same coin. The picture that we're often given in our culture around what sensitivity looks like is someone who's very fragile, someone who is naive, someone who, is a bit of a shrinking violet, maybe someone who's shy. There's like a breakability feeling to sensitivity. And I used to have a lot of shame around that I was very trusting, and to the point of naivete. Like someone would tell me something and I would just believe them, or something would affect me a lot more than someone else. Like, a movie with scary content. Like my friends would watch a scary movie and be able to sleep that night, and I'd watch a scary movie and not be able to sleep for the next 2 months. And I just feel like something must be wrong with me, right? Because the culture that most of us have grown up in has telegraphed to us that sensitivity it is a challenge, that it is something that diminishes our capacity, that makes us more fragile, makes us more alien in the world, and something we have to overcome. Now, what I have found in discovering and working with my own sensitivity, and also serving thousands of sensitive people around the world, is that it's the exact opposite. That sensitive people are actually like beyond resilient, beyond capable, unbreakable in this way. We live and survive in this world all the time. We are unbreakable. And that, contrary to sort of the popular belief I grew up with, that sensitive people just like can't handle hard things, that actually we're designed to handle some of the hardest things, that we have this incredible capacity actually to move through really challenging stuff and get to the other side of it. And I'm going to talk more about that in a little bit when I talk about some of the spiritual gifts of being sensitive. But first, I want to talk a little bit about the term highly sensitive person, because I feel like it's been a gateway for a lot of people. And I think it can really help to ground in your understanding of what it means to be sensitive. Because likely if you're listening to this, either you or the person you care about, who you're listening to this podcast for, has probably been called sensitive your whole life, and maybe not in the most positive ways. And so it's helpful to know that actually there is a whole category of people out there, of our species and other species, that is identifiable, called highly sensitive. So this term was coined by Dr. Elaine Aron in the 90s, and it was used to describe a certain section of the population, depending on what research you're looking at, anywhere from 15 to 20% of the population, that has a more sensitive nervous system than, at the time, what they were talking about as a more neurotypical nervous system or a more normal nervous system. So there's an acronym that goes along with this that helped sort of give context to Dr. Elaine Aron's research. And you can see if you can find yourself in that acronym. And that acronym is DOES, DOES. So D stands for depth of processing. Highly sensitive people tend to process things very deeply. So we're not surface processors. Like if we watch a movie, we're going to be thinking about everything in the movie, each character, their motivations, how they interact with one another. Then we're going to go to the next level, right? We're going to think about, well, what was it like for the actors to get cast in this movie? Oh, and what was it like for the director to be watching the actors interact with one another? And oh, what was it like for people who actually lived through this in real life? What do they think about the movie? It's like we have this inability, right, to just be like surface processors. Like any information that comes our way, we're processing really deeply. And, this is a gift, right? Because we are able to go underneath the surface of things. But it also can sometimes feel challenging because of the second part of this acronym. And while our depth of processing is a gift, it can sometimes feel overwhelming or challenging because of the O aspect of the DOES acronym. And O stands for overstimulation. So highly sensitive people literally take in more sensory input than people who are not sensitive. So we perceive things like lights as being over bright, or music as being too loud, or clothes as being extra uncomfortable, because our nervous system and our perceptive system literally takes in more sensory detail than someone who is not sensitive. And I've seen statistics thrown around about this, and I have never found anything that was like I was able to completely verify. But one statistic I found is that we're like receiving 40 times more sensory input. And sensory input is things like light, texture, sound, emotional tone. And so we're receiving so much more sensory input in every single moment that if you are sensitive in this way, it can very easily lead to overstimulation. And you've probably noticed this in your life if you're a sensitive person. Overwhelm has been a part of my experience for as long as I can remember. And I didn't always have the language to call it overwhelm or too muchness. But I would feel like anxious or shy, or I would actually get into modes of like hyper doing, like I wouldn't be able to relax or let go because I was sort of on this fight or flight edge of overstimulation. That's one of the places that I go to. So if you are someone who tends to get overstimulated by things like bright lights, loud music, feeling somebody else's anger in the other room, then you are probably a highly sensitive person. So the E of this acronym refers to emotionally reactive or empathic. I prefer the second one of these, but emotional and empathic. So this is a trait of high sensitivity. It's part of receiving so much sensory input. The other side of that, right, is this like bigness of energy inside of ourselves. So we tend to have big emotions, big feelings, and be incredibly empathic, like really feel other people's feelings, because that's one of the things that we're picking up on and tracking and attuning to. And our ability to attune to so many details and so many subtleties is we're picking up on other people's feelings. We're feeling them inside of ourselves. And so if you are someone that tends to have big emotional reactions to things, and this is positive, right, as well as negative, like it could be like my example of when I was a kid, seeing a scary movie and not being able to sleep for 2 months. That's, kind of a negative reaction to something. But then also, I am the kind of person who could see a movie or like a sunset or have an interaction or read a book where it just completely lights me up in this way where I just am experiencing this like, throughway of joy in my body and my being that is so vivid, and so buoyant. And so, having big feelings about what we experience, it's a gift, right? And it also it increases our ability to be incredibly empathic with others, to feel what other people are feeling, which is challenging, but also like a really beautiful skill to have. And this brings us into the last part of the DOES acronym, which is S, sensitive to subtle stimuli. This is the thing about being sensitive, is that we can sense things that are very, very subtle. Like I remember being really, for example, bothered by tags in my clothes when I was a kid. And like other people just didn't even seem to notice them. And I'm like, how could you not notice this? This is so uncomfortable. And, to other people that might be very subtle, but to me it was very obvious. And so as a sensitive person, it's like you're able to read the subtleties. Like you walk into a room and you're like, oof, someone just had a fight in this room. Or you walk into the room and you're like, I can feel the buoyancy. Someone was just laughing. The subtleties of colors in a sunset, the subtleties of a piece of music. It's an extra sensory ability. And that's the thing about sensitive people that I found, is that there's an extra sensory aspect to it. And Dr. Elaine Aron talks about this in her books and in her work, that, there's a level in which we look in the past and in today's world at those who are in the creative field, the healing professions, the witches, the seers, the shamans, that they were and are likely sensitive people because we have this ability to peer into the unseen, to be attuned to the subtleties of life, to notice these unseen threads and waves of feeling and information that are moving through the world. Sensitivity in this way, it's a form of neurodiversity. And there are many different forms of neurodiversity, and some of them overlap, right? Like some people might identify as autistic and be hearing what I'm talking about and saying, that's so me. Some people might more identify with the term highly sensitive. Some people might identify with ADHD. There's a lot of different variants in neurodiversity. That's why it's diverse. But I do think it's important for sensitives who maybe only identify with the label of sensitive to know that, yes, you are neurodiverse. Yes, this is a form of neurodiversity, and that there's profound gifts in being neurodiverse in this way. Sensitive people are wired to experience life more deeply, to experience more when they're in a body in this lifetime. It's quite extraordinary and also sometimes quite hard. One of the things that makes a sensitive's brain so unique is that it's always on. You think about this acronym and everything I've described so far, this sensitivity to stimuli, this, empathicness, all of these things add up to having a brain that is always tracking. And of course, our life experiences can amplify this sometimes if we find ourselves going in and out of hypervigilance. But as a rule, sensitive people have a brain that is taking care of details. It's tracking details, and a lot of them. And so this is, sort of the blessing and the curse of being in a body that has a sensitive nervous system in this way, is that we perceive a lot, we take in a lot of details. It makes us very attuned listeners, counselors, guides, lovers, parents, all the things. And on the other side of that, it can sometimes feel like we're never off, like we're never off duty until we're alone. So you might feel that as well, like until we're alone. For me, it's like alone in a dark room with my salt lamp glowing. And then I feel like I start to come home. This is one of the main tasks for us as sensitive people in this lifetime, is to learn how to come home, to learn to have the tools to know how to come home at any time, at any moment, no matter what's happening, no matter what just went on that day, to be able to come home to yourself at the end of the day. And this connection with self is something that I find is really important for sensitive people. It's like, this is the primary connection for us often. It's the most important one. It's the most nourishing one. And so to give ourselves permission to take enough time to be with ourselves is really important. It's often how we refill the well. Not all sensitive people are introverts, but a lot of them are. And so if you are an introvert, you identify as being an introvert, just know it's like extra important that you take that time for yourself. So we talked about some of the blessings of being in a sensitive body, right? That there's this deep creativity. There is this natural inclination towards depth and meaning and understanding. That there is the ability to attune to subtlety, to really the poetry of life, because we're so attuned to subtleties that we can attune to other people. We can be amazing counselors, guides, healers, artists. We have this ability to just sort of naturally access the unseen world. Like, so many of us are naturally accessing that all the time and have since we were really young. And so these are all incredible blessings of being a sensitive. And then, of course, there's challenges, of which we've discussed a few, right? It's very easy for us to become overstimulated, overwhelmed, to, depending on how we were socialized, have different reactions to that overwhelm. Sometimes it means that we might be overwhelmed and sort of go down the rabbit hole of then trying to do too much, or, make things right by overperforming, or we might completely shut down. It can be read as, shyness. It can be read as reserve, introversion, awkwardness. But one of the things that I find to be the most challenging for sensitive people is our sensitivity to suffering. Sensitive people are just sensitive, right? And so one of the things that we're sensitive to, and one of the biggest, most overwhelming feelings on this planet, is suffering. And it's a part of the human experience, right? It's part of the textures when we come here. And yet this is something that I see over and over again with the sensitives that I work with, is that there's a deep overwhelm around the abundance of just how much suffering there is in this world, and a powerful sensitivity to it. And so there's this level in which, if you're not sensitive, right, it might be much easier for you to hear a news story and do something about it, or to even, listen to your friend telling a really, really hard story and jump right into action. If you're sensitive and the quality of that suffering is profound, just processing that alone can be really hard. And we live in a world where we're telegraphed stories of suffering constantly, personal suffering, collective suffering. And so I think we're in this space as sensitives right now in this world where it almost feels like we can't catch our breath sometimes. Like, we're so sensitive to other people's suffering. We feel it inside of our own body. It causes suffering for us in a profound way, where I think many of us are in this state of complete overwhelm of I can't possibly keep up with all of this suffering. I can't be attuned to it, and I can't actually be in a state of action around it. And I really want to telegraph to you, if you're listening to this right now, that there's nothing wrong with you if you feel this way. Absolutely nothing. And in fact, this is part of what I wanted to talk about today in, what it actually means to be sensitive. Sensitive people are the canaries in the coal mine. And that's like a little bit of a, textured metaphor there, like a little rough, but it's true that we, as in these very, very highly sensitive bodies, sensitive nervous systems, sensitive psyches, that we will often be the ones who are the front runners of showing that something is off in the world, that something is not working, that the way in which humanity is living is not actually how we should be living, that it needs to be adjusted. And this can be very physical. It can also be very emotional or very spiritual in nature. So, like on a physical level, from a really young age, I had a really severe undiagnosed gluten intolerance and had stomach issues my whole life, sort of cascaded into all these chronic health problems in my late teens. And, at the time, nobody was talking about gluten intolerances. Like, I tried all these other things to cut out before I even thought about gluten, because I had never even heard of it before. It wasn't anywhere. And, looking back on it now, I was born in the 80s. I was a child in the 90s. It was like big time, this era of, Roundup being used on all of the wheat, and, bread that's been stripped of all its nutritional value. And my body was a front runner in saying, this does not work. And so it can be hard sometimes to be the canary in the coal mine, to be the front runner, because you might experience things in your body that other people haven't experienced yet, or is not a part of the cultural zeitgeist yet. Now, of course, everybody knows about gluten-free, but, almost 20 years ago when this was coming up for me, it was pretty much unheard of. And so this can happen too in other ways, right? Like, you might have sensitivities to other things, maybe sensitivities to technology, maybe sensitivities to, certain things being used in your house, like sensitive people in this way. We have these bodies and these nervous systems and these psyches that are constantly giving us information about what's working in the environment and what is not. And this is biologically by design. And this is something that I do find very empowering about Dr. Elaine Aron's work, is that there's this reassurance, there's this, reevaluation of sensitive people, where it's showing that sensitive people, actually, this is a evolutionarily advantageous thing. That's why it exists in our species, and it exists in many other species in the world, this subsection of the population that you would call highly sensitive. That neurodiversity itself, right, is by design. Nature designs this. And in the human population, if you're highly sensitive, right, the highly sensitive person might have been the first person to notice that there's a change in the weather and a storm is coming in. Might be the first person to notice that there was a change in the patterns of the herds moving through, that their migration patterns are going to be changing. They might be the one who's receiving information from the other world that can help, figure out which plant in this new place they're moving into is going to be the one who's going to help us to heal. And so there's this like advantageous aspect for our species of having a certain amount of our species be sensitive. And so the ways in which we reject sensitivity is silly because it's actually rejecting this like superpower of humanity, our ability to be sensitive. And in fact, I really believe that humans as a species are incredibly sensitive. We are incredibly sensitive when it comes to, you look at all the species in the world, like the way we're designed, our nervous systems, our brains make us a very sensitive animal. And part of that sensitivity means that we're very sensitive to trauma. And this is part of where really rich cultural traditions, intact cultural traditions of healing come in, is that when we have culture holding us and culture holding also the diversity that exists within our population, including the neurodiversity that exists in our population, that when we experience a trauma, we have the cultural tools to unwind it from our bodies, to release it, to come out of freeze and back into our body and back into the forward momentum of our life. And right now we're in this cultural backlog, deep backlog of unprocessed trauma. And so, of course, as people coming into sensitive bodies, we are feeling this. We are processing in this on behalf of the collective, and we're reflecting back to the collective. Oh, this is how much needs to be done here. Or just, this is how much we need to orient to this. We need to orient back to ourselves, back to our nervous systems, back to what's true, back to our centers. And so, I consider the earth to be this archangel consciousness who is incredibly sensitive. So as sensitives, we are made in her image. This planet's very sensitive. It is part of part of the beauty of being here. And I think something that humanity has known more than it has forgotten over the years in its cycle of knowing and remembering, that like we are here to be a part of creation, and we're here to be a part of keeping a very like delicate balance of harmony that's always evolving and always becoming. But it is a delicate balance because our earth is sensitive. She has an incredibly sensitive nervous system. Her systems are sensitive, right? And that doesn't make her weak. It doesn't make her fragile. Certainly nobody thinks of our earth as fragile, right? Or lesser than, or somehow unable to handle hard things. It's the opposite. Like our planet is so resilient. This earth has been through so many cataclysms and changes and extinctions, and yet remains and evolves and grows and is always moving towards growth. It is always moving towards more evolution, more unfoldment, more meaning. And as sensitives, we're made in her image. We are a microcosm of this greater macrocosm of this beautiful, profound, powerful, sensitive planet that we live on. And so this is what it actually means to be sensitive. It means that we are made in the image of the very planet that we live on, that we're here to like attune to the unseen guidance that is going to help move humanity back into a state of balance and connection with with their own selves and with this planet. So what do you need in order to keep being yourself in this world, right? Because sometimes it can feel hard to be a sensitive person in this world. It's overwhelming. The world we live in right now was not designed for anybody's nervous system, let alone a sensitive person's nervous system. So what do you need in order to really like lean into who you actually are as a sensitive person? Well, you need time to feel, like to give yourself time to just feel what is coming up for you. Often we have a backlog of feelings at the end of the day. So to give yourself permission to, put on a song, put on headphones, close your eyes and just feel for a little bit. You're going to need more time to feel than other people. Time to feel and permission to expand, like permission to take that space when you need it, because you will need more space and time than somebody who doesn't have a sensitive nervous system. as well as giving yourself permission to attune to what is calling to you. There's so much messaging in the world around what we should be doing, how we should be showing up, how we should be living our lives. When we give ourselves time to feel and permission to expand, space to expand into, we can then really start to feel into like, what is calling to me? What is my calling versus what is the loudness of the world? And finally, maybe this is something I can give you today in this moment, is really the understanding that you do deserve these things. It can feel like our job is to constantly be showing up for the collective, to constantly be showing up for other people, to like basically brave the fire that we often feel in our nervous system that is the symptom of too muchness, to keep putting ourselves out there again and again and again. But you deserve time to feel, space to expand. You deserve to pursue what is authentically calling to you. And that's so much of what this podcast is about, right? Like, remembering why you're here is remembering that like your call is going to be unique, and that in order to hear it, you need to give yourself time to feel, permission and the space to expand, and that it's through those things that we hear that call and we really move deeply into our purpose in this life. I have realized over the years that I am meant to be serving sensitive people. As a sensitive person myself, as an empath, I am here to work with other sensitive people. And partially that's because I love it. I love working with other sensitive people. I find sensitive people fascinating and powerful and so gifted. And so it's such an honor for me to be here and to be speaking with you and to hold this space. And I'm so excited to announce that I have a brand new offering coming up, something I've been dreaming into now for 8-9 years. This has been a dream that's been a long time in the making. And this offering is called Earth Angel School. This is an 11-week spiritual school that was specifically designed for sensitives and empaths. This school is here to help you understand who you are, to unlock the true nature of your gifts, and to step into the potential of your life, to really grasp and understand the deep soul-led potential of your life by recognizing who you are, by getting the tools that you need to step into that. So this 11-week program is going to be the most intimate class I've ever done. I really wanted this to be an experience where I can sit with a group of people and be with this community of like-minded folks and be in a space of mentorship, to be your mentor on this journey as someone who has been walking with this understanding of what it means to be sensitive and what it means to be empathic. I see that there are so many gifts that are wanting to come in for us, that are wanting to come in for you. And I really want an opportunity to work more personally, more intimately with folks, and to like draw back the curtain so you can actually see who you are, why you're here, and have the very essential tools to change your life by understanding this and connecting to this on a level that you haven't experienced yet before. So if you are interested in this and you want to hear more details, go to asiasuler.com/earthangelschool. On that page, you're going to find all of the details about this program, what we're going to be doing and unlocking each single week together, when our community meetings are going to happen, the wealth of bonus materials and supportive materials that will be there for you as you unfold in this journey. I'm so excited for this. It feels like me stepping into my mission and me remembering why I'm here to be offering this. And I cannot wait to see who steps through that door to go on this journey with me. So the program starts at the end of April, so you have time to feel into it. And in the meantime, I just want to thank you so much for being here, for walking with sensitivity in the way that you do. It is not easy to be sensitive in this world, but as we've talked about in this episode, it's so powerful. sensitive people have the ability to transform this world of insensitivity. Sensitive people have the ability to bring sanity back to a world that has become insensitive to what is meaningful and true and real. So thank you for everything that you're doing. Thank you for being here, for being willing to be in a sensitive body. And thank you for all the ways in which you are reconnecting to yourself, giving yourself permission to step back into your center, and for all the ways in which you are remembering why you're here. So if you like this episode, I would love to hear from you. Leave me a voice message. I have an answering machine over on my website at asiasuler.com/remember. You can leave me a voice message there. It's been so fun to get these voice messages. And I would love to know, as a sensitive, what do you want to hear more about? What would you like expanded upon? I want to keep talking about this topic. I want to keep expanding into this because there's so much depth here. There's so much material here. And the more we understand ourselves as sensitives, the more we can step into our gifts in this world.